All right, I'm at the Red House with my friend Chris Anthony, aka Teddy, aka one of my favorite bassists.
Appreciate you, man.
Thank you for coming over, man.
No problem. I appreciate the phone call and the invite.
Yeah, haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, it's been counting COVID years, maybe year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
Something like that.
It's been a minute.
It's been a while.
Yeah,
It's been a while.
yeah. We played together prior to like in the in between time. So I was like, Michael Kenshin was one of the first bassists that I played with after my trio broke up.
Yeah.
And then I started playing with you, and then Michael moved back, and that was like, and when I was not playing at all. So anyway, Michael reached out. I was like playing with Michael, and then I was like planning on kind of having multiple opportunities to play with multiple people, but
Right.
still haven't really been playing much. So
Yeah.
anyway, long story short, I haven't got to play with you in forever, but
Yeah, it's
I
been a
really
while.
enjoy playing with you.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
So how you been?
I've been good. I've been good and I've been fortunate.
Yeah.
I can say that going through the pandemic, it did not affect me like most of my musicians friends, like it affected them. And even in regular life, regular people with family and just working, I didn't get hit as hard as everybody else, like got laid off and had to figure life stuff out and all that. At the time, I was still working at Spectrum. So we technically got busier when the pandemic happened. So I got a raise right in the middle when shit hit the fan.
Damn.
Sorry. But I've been very fortunate. I'm outside of having COVID a couple of times and it sucked, but I didn't come out with any lasting effects of it. I'm still healthy, family's still healthy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been good, been fortunate.
Yeah. Well, speaking of fortune, when we talked recently, you told me that you had been able to make the switch to music full time, which I thought would be a great kind of kickoff point
Yeah.
for us to talk about. I don't know, talk about musicianship. This space is often a place for us for me to be able to talk to people about creativity, about the real sort of mechanical aspects of what it means to be a musician, and all sorts of different avenues. And when you told me you went full time, that sounded interesting because you had a lot of positive things to say about it. So where does that story start?
So I want to say it's probably 2019, and I was just getting in good with Spectrum, like finding my rhythm, how I'm working, things of that nature, making a career plan to move up in the rank and all that other stuff. And I was still playing for Jukebox off and on with spot dates because they were still doing a lot of acoustic shows. So just the main four at the time would just do stuff. And whenever they had bigger dates, they would call me and the keyboard player to come play. So I wasn't full time with them, but I was still playing for them. And I noticed that my schedule with work was directly interfering when I was going to be able to go out with them. So because they wasn't calling that much, but when they did, I was having a hard time either being able to show up on time for like either load in or just showing up on time for the gig at all because it's outside the city. And I'm getting off maybe on a good day at 7:00 working for Spectrum. So that was probably the song for the last 6 months of 2019. Then going into the beginning of 2020 when COVID was really starting to kind of like fully take off and they had a name for it and all that stuff. Things were getting shut down. Then the calls stopped coming, period. So I took it as, okay, no one's really playing like that right now. I still have my job. I just got a raise at my job. It's probably safe and responsible for me to just kind of start putting my energy into that. And that was probably the very beginning of me starting the process of completely letting music go, like in a whole. And I had that conversation with my uncle because he's a bass player. He's the main reason why I started playing bass. And he went through, minus the COVID part, he went through the same transition in his younger years. Like, okay, I'm working for Siemens when they were still Factory's still open up here.
Right.
And the hot commodity in North Carolina, or the western part of North Carolina, because he's going all over the place playing for random people, but he works third shift and he's working more weekends now. So he was like, as much as I love music, as much as I love playing, I know that I had a family I had to raise and take care of. So he made that same decision where he stopped answering those calls. Or, I mean, not physically stop answering the call, but like, hey, I can't do it, got to work, blah, blah, blah. And that was his transition. And I had that conversation with him just to see where his mind was and see the after effects of it so I could prepare myself mentally to let go of this thing that I love so much. So did that, had a conversation with him. He shot me straight. I came home, talked to my wife, told her where I was, how I felt about it. And she said, if you really let music go just completely, are you really going to be able to be okay with that? And I honestly told her, to be honest with you, I'm not going to be okay with it. I'm not. That's, even before I was making good money as a musician, it was still an avenue for me. And I think that was around the time that me and her were having conversations about different things that we had for release and things of that nature and all that stuff. And I said, I never really thought of it that way because I've always done it. So I never looked at it as an avenue of release whenever life was life and stuff like that. And it made me realize how much of it was embedded in me without me even knowing. Like, we don't get up and think about breathing or eating. It's just, you're breathing. And when you get hungry, you feel it, you go get something to eat. Same thing with music. Whenever I'm in a funk and I start playing, it just goes away. I'm not thinking about the negativity that I was dealing with before I started the gig or the rehearsal or whatever. I just know when I sit down and I play that first note, even while I'm setting my stuff up, I'm still got it weighing on me. But as soon as I start playing, it literally just, that feeling goes away. And I never paid attention to it. So when I started wrapping my mind around it more, I was like, this is going to be way tougher than I thought. But I was trying to force myself to not be okay with it, but to process the emotions and to still carry through. So 2020 happened. 21, things started to kind of open back up a little bit again. Started getting called, and I think we were about to do CCMF, Carolina Country Music Festival, down in Myrtle Beach. It's like one of the bigger country music festivals that's on the East Coast. And we were going to do that, or we were about to do that. And I had a conversation with Mike, the guy that pulled me in, the drummer. And I told him, I said, hey, man, the way it's looking, and you already kind of know, it's either I have to quit my job and do this, or I'm gonna have to let y'all go. Because they were the only band that I was playing for on a consistent basis. Like the for hire stuff, I wasn't even getting that anymore because I was so busy. When I was available, I was so busy with them. So that kind of like semi cut off all the other avenues of music that I was, that I was in at the time. And he was like, well, I guess we got a decision to make. So him, the other guys, Morgan, Dustin, and John, they had a conversation about it. And they all had individually had said stuff to be like, hey, I really want you to know we are working on a plan to get you on full time. And I can honestly say they showed physically, outside of verbally, but they physically showed that they really wanted me to be a part of what they had going. And I think that early off helped me later make the decision to leave. So I had a date in mind and everything. I said, hey, I'm gonna do CCMF with y'all. I think the next month we had BCMF, which is Barefoot Country Music Festival in Wildwood, New Jersey. I said I'll be able to do those two, but I won't have any more. That's when my time will run out. I won't have any more vacation time, sick time, nothing. Like I've stretched my, and I had a little bit of leniency because I was good tech for Spectrum. So my manager and my general manager, they were fully aware of my situation. They would look out for me every now and again. But, you know, I had basically literally hit my fork in the road. Like I had to make a decision. Like I can't keep taking off and them improving it. So it was either I let them go or I quit my job. So we did Carolina Country Music Festival. It went really, really, really well for us. We got a great response out of it. Some things were happening on the business side that was going to open things up booking wise for us to get on bigger platforms. And I think we got back, they had a conversation. Mike called me, I want to say maybe the following week. I think we got back on a Sunday, Wednesday or Thursday. He called me, something like that. He's like, what's your number? I was like, well, what do you mean? He was like, what do you need to make every week to sustain you so you can pay your bills? We know we can't pay you what you're worth, and we know we can't match what you're making at Spectrum, but we're gonna make an effort to get damn close. You tell us what the number is, and we're gonna figure it out. So, sat down with Brittany, and I said, they're asking for a number. And they had asked before, you know, just kind of just shooting the shit and what you want to make a week. But I could tell this time that they were like, this was an actual offer. Like, hey, like this is the beginning part of conversation, like for serious of yes or no, we can do it.
Yeah.
So I talked to her. She looked at the bill chart, see what I was pulling in every week. She said, okay, if you can make this much from them every week, we'll be fine. We'll have to cut some stuff, but we'll be okay. It's like, all right, well, how do you feel about it? And she gave me an honest answer, which I was a little bit surprised at what she said, but it wasn't anything negative. Like it was, hey, you got to do what you got to do. Outside of that to make sure, you know, if anything goes awry, you need to have contingency plans put in place. But if this is what you really want to do, I really can't stop you. Because if I say no, you know, you can easily resent me for it and all this other stuff. And of course I told her that I wouldn't, but being a human, you're going to feel emotions. So you really can't say how you're going to feel about something or what you're going to do about something until you're actually in it. You know what I'm saying? So had that conversation, called him. I said, hey, at the very bare minimum, this is what I need every week. Like salary, this is what I need to pull in every week. He said, okay. We're going to have to figure it out. But we want you. We want you with us. We're at that point where I call it a purgatory period where when you got to make a decision. And as a band, they were at that same point as well. They're like, we've got to make a decision to make an investment that's going to make us better and continue us on the trajectory that we're on. And I was like, well, you know, I appreciate you putting that much trust in me and putting that much value on me to think that I'm going to be able to keep carrying the enhancement that y'all are making. So I felt honored, but at the same time, I was deadly scared because since I was 18, I had some type of 9-to-5 job. Music was always the weekend. And when I was working for Spectrum, that was the only time I had a job where it was a direct conflict with my music career. So even then, I didn't think it was going to be as much as a conflict as it ended up being, and where it was going to take me to a point where I was going to have to make a life decision of this caliber. But I did. They said, we'll figure it out. We're going to take care of you, and laid out the details. And I said, okay. The following week, pulled my manager aside, said, "Hey, it's been a good run. Putting my notice in." And surprisingly, he said, "I'm glad you're doing it." Because, like I said, him and his boss, my general manager at the time, they were fully aware of what I was doing. And they knew of Chris Lane born and raised in Kernersville, coming out of Kernersville, and they see where he was going. So they were like, "Well, we've heard you. Your band is really, 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 really good. So we don't think that you're making a decision that's going to be altering to your life and there could be trouble. So shoot for it." And that was literally the beginning of me becoming a full-time musician.
Hell yeah, man. Feel like there's a lot of room where we could still take that. That's pretty epic.
Yeah.
And I will say, like, it says something really significant, I think, about them, because you're not just a father, but you're a husband to a wife, and the fact that your family structure was willing to, like, your wife was willing to kind of support you on that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a huge deal.
I want to say my decision to leave my job was hard. It was way harder for Brittany to say to me what she said. She said a lot. I can't narrow it down to just a one-word answer because she gave a full-blown response to it. But she was making a bigger sacrifice than I was. Because not only did she have to put trust in me, which she does, she trusts me, but she had to put even more trust in me to know that I'm going to hold up my end of the bargain. She had to put trust into Jukebox that they were going to stay true to their word and take care of me like they said they were going to. And she had to step out on faith just as much to know that the household is going to be taken care of.
Yeah.
So looking back on it now, she made an even tougher decision than I did. Because ultimately, when it's all said and done, I made the decision to do something that every musician dreams of doing. Being a full-time, doing something that they love to do and being compensated enough to have a livelihood off of it. And, well, hell, just out of musicians, not a lot of people in general get to do that. So the magnitude of it, I will say, definitely was on her part. And I can honestly, truthfully say, with her doing that, it just on me on a personal level, it made me find a new level of respect and love specifically for her within our marriage. Because it's very easy to look at all of the blocks lined up and you take something away and you don't know what you're going to put back that's detrimental to the foundation, because we're still early off in our marriage. We've been together for a while, but we're still early in our marriage. And we're still laying foundation, and to take some pieces away and not knowing how you're going to put them back, or if the material that you're putting it back with is going to be just as strong as everything else that you're laying this foundation with is going to hold, it's very big. So that's something that I will never be able to forget. That's probably one of the milestones that I will say in our marriage that we hit that I can never take away from her, ever. And yeah.
Yeah, I love that, man. I love that. So what did it feel like, I guess, when you finally wrapped your head around the notion that you were in this position and you were really going to do this shit?
It hit me way sooner than I thought. So my last day as a technician was on a Friday, I think. I think it was a Friday. That was my last day. And last day, you're not in quota. You're not running any jobs. You're basically cleaning your van out, chilling in the office, signing a couple of paperwork, do your exit interviews with HR, stuff like that, yada, yada, yada. So I wasn't running any jobs, but I know I had a gig with them that night, and I clocked out from Spectrum, turned all my stuff in. My manager dropped me off at home because we took our work vans home every night. So he dropped me off. He said, "Godspeed, man. Stay in touch." And I walked through the house and I took those boots off and I took that uniform off, and that's when it hit me that I'm never going to have to put this thing on again unless I want to. And I looked at my bass sitting in the corner, and that's when it hit me that my livelihood is simply come down to that instrument, that one instrument. And I felt an array of emotions immediately. Thank God Brittany was not home, because I was excited, I was scared, I was somewhat sad, and sadness only because I immediately just like had remorse, like, what the fuck did I just do? Like, I'm leaving a $20-something hour job with no less than 45 hours a week and great benefits to go play in front of drunken people yelling out "Freebird."
That self-doubt stuff
Yeah.
starts to come to the top.
So it hit me immediately. But like I said, we had a gig that night. So as soon as that gig started, it just went completely the other way. I was just full blown like, yeah, I made the right decision. So it was a crazy 24 hours after the last day of Spectrum work, but I immediately settled into the fact that I knew I made the right decision.
Yeah. That is the very vivid picture you paint of kind of like looking at the bass.
Yeah.
In the corner.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's movie type shit, but I mean, that was just what it was. Yeah, even to this day, thinking about it, I kind of get goosebumps because, like I said, I've never made a decision like that, of that caliber ever in my life. Like, that was my first time ever making some type of decision where it could immediately come back to haunt me.
Well, but also, like, I think we probably have this in common. I think this is consistent among artists, among musicians. Your identity is kind of divided when you're split like that.
Yes.
It's almost like, in my experience, especially before at this stage in my life, like at the stages in my life when I've really had to like give my identity over to, like, surrender my identity temporarily over to a job.
Yeah.
It's like you're putting a cloak on yourself or something. It's like you're cutting your whole real person off and then stepping into this place where you're like, I'm just like, it's like how a submissive wolf feels or something. It's like that you roll over on your back and you're like, I have to do what you say, and nothing in my nature likes that, but that's how it is right now.
Bruh, you've to the T, you have literally just described my emotions and where I was mentally when I was like, I'm gonna have to quit playing so I can work for somebody else. That's, bruh, to the T. That is literally how I felt. Like, I was on my back submitting, and it was not fun.
Yeah.
It was not fun.
I know that feeling because I've been there multiple times.
Yeah.
And, it's just like, you're not in the right place. And you know that you're not yourself in those moments. And then, so I can imagine shedding all that off and looking at that instrument and kind of being like, fuck, now it's down to like the real me.
The real me.
Yeah.
And that by itself was a whole new avenue of life that I've never fully engaged in for as long as I've been playing. Because like I said, I've been working a 9-to-5 job longer than I've actually been like out gigging to where I was making decent money. I've been playing bass for 16 years, but I didn't start, getting called like that until maybe I was about 4 or 5 years in. Mm-hmm. So I had more working history outside of music than I did in music. So that was a whole avenue that I didn't even realize that I had not tapped into within myself. And I was the one as a musician that I was talk to all my younger homies whenever they would ask me, just advice in general. I would always tell them that who you are as a musician, who you are on your instrument is a direct reflection of who you are as a person, your characteristics, how you play, the thought process whenever you're creating, all that stuff is a mirror image of who you are off your instrument. So if you're having difficulties or writer's block or creative blocks or things of that nature, take a look at what's going on in your life in general, just outside of music. And if there's turmoil or things going on, I'm pretty sure you can directly trace that to those issues that's keeping you from being productive on the music side. So with that not being the case anymore, and I have just this big ass question mark sitting in front of me, it's like you don't second guess if you really know yourself, but you tend to find out like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff about myself that I really haven't tapped into yet. So not only am I going on this journey of being a full-time musician, but I'm also starting this journey of really getting to know who I really am, what my temperament really is. Like, am I a clear thinker as much as I think I am, or am I as rational as I thought I was whenever I'm problem solving? All that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a journey that I'm still on, but I've learned a lot about myself doing that, making that decision.
It's a cold, hard look at yourself, I think.
Bruh, cold as ice.
Yeah.
It really dead is. You have no choice but to stare at the man in the mirror and really look at yourself and say, this is who I am.
I can't imagine a more empowering thing for anybody to do. And it's not just, music isn't the only source. Doing music full time isn't the only source for that. But when you have that devil, when you got that thing,
bruh,
it's just how it is. It's just, it's part of the old, like, that's the destiny we all like hope to be suited for.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
What is, so what's, tell me about Jukebox Rehab, man.
Jukebox Rehab.
Did I ever tell you, by the way, that I was in a band called Jukebox Riot? Did I ever tell you that?
I don't think you did.
Back in the day, one of my first bands ever was called Jukebox Riot.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. More you know.
Yep.
My timeline, COVID years, just messing my memory all up. But I want to say I think I started playing for them in 2018. I think that was the first time I played for them, was in 2018. I was doing mostly R&B and gospel, and I felt like I hit a stagnant point with the shows and the gigs that I was doing on the R&B side. And when I mean stagnant, I mean I didn't feel like I was being stretched musically. I started getting complacent in what I was doing, which it was still fun. The caliber of gigs were still good, but just on a personal level as a musician, I didn't feel like I was reaching enough. I wasn't being challenged. So anytime I felt that way as a musician at that time, I would always try to compensate by trying new stuff in my practice time. Like, well, I've never played this, so let me just try playing it. And I told myself that, you know what? What's a genre of music that I know that I could really tap into and really dive in and learn and have good success? And I was like, you know what? I wouldn't mind playing country music. Now, up until that point, I did not listen to country music leisurely. I only had a vague knowledge of country artists, period. I didn't know any country artists locally on the local side. But I was like, you know what? That just might be something fun to do. And I made a Facebook post and I said, hey, anybody know if any country bands looking for a bass player, let me know. And 10 minutes, Mike inboxed me and said, hey, coincidentally, country band I'm playing for, we're looking for a bass player to sit in with us on some gigs and possibly, you know, playing full time. So me and him talked back and forth, and I've known of Mike for a really, really long time. Met him on the gospel side, church that he played at. We knew the same people, all that stuff. We've known of each other, but we never like officially met each other. And I think that was like the first interaction that we had where we actually was talking 101. So it didn't really feel like an introduction because, like I said, we known of each other, but I feel like that was our real first introduction whenever he hit me up. So I did that gig with them. I want to say maybe a couple of months later, I played for them again, and then they just started happening more frequent. But like I said, at the time, they were doing mostly acoustic shows. So it was just John Morgan and Dust on guitar and Mike playing his cajon, and they would, on the big gigs, they would call me. But I think 2018 was my introduction to them, and that started my journey in country music. And I want to say 2019, that's when it started happening more, and it came to that, you know, split. That's when that happened. But that was my introduction to country and Jukebox Rehab was in 2018.
I wonder what made you pick country of all things. Like, I mean, you said that you just thought it'd be an interesting challenge or whatever, but yeah, it's just like, I don't know. I wonder what made you pick that.
So, to be very candid, me as a musician, I've always harped on being what we call in the bass community, being a low end keeper. So bass players in general have evolved over the decades, the years, all that stuff. And you started seeing more guys being more expressive outside of jazz and alternative settings. So
Like for reference, like the Victor Wooten type branch.
I would say, yeah, in a sense, probably not as extreme, but being more expressive as in, you know, playing more than whole note, half note, low end stuff, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I told myself, you can either do one or two things. You can either go back to the beginning and venture off into jazz, and we all know that umbrella is big as the earth itself.
Yeah.
And try to figure out where you fit in. But either way, there's gonna be a learning curve, because at the time I didn't know how to efficiently read. I still remembered because, you know, I've been in band since middle school. So I learned how to read it. So that was something I was going to have to knock the dust off and get back into. And I knew I was going to have to step my theory up to be worth a damn whenever I'm sitting in a trio or a quartet or something like that. But that was just the mechanical music side. Then I had to start showing face and figure out, you know, locally, well, where's the stuff happening at? You know, who's playing what on what night, learning certain guys' names so I can, you know, either hit them up for some pointers or just to go support, you know, that whole thing. As a hired gun, as I call it, whenever you're trying to break into a scene or you're trying to get out there, the best way to do it is always just be in the line of sight. You know, out of sight, out of mind is a very real thing as a musician. So if people don't really see you or hear you like that, they don't think to call you for nothing. So I knew that I was going to have to start that process again. And I'm stepping into a bigger part of the ocean than I've ever been musically. And staying in the realm of being candid, I knew that my skill set as a musician only went so far. So again, I had to be honest with myself and be honest with the workload that I was going to have to endure in order to be an actual vital asset to whatever situation I found myself in, which I wasn't scared of, but I was just realistic with the workload. And I knew that I was going to have to do a lot to step into that. And quite honestly, I haven't even put that ambition down But I picked country music, and it wasn't really country by itself. It was more country and pop because it played to my strength as a disciplined bass player. I've prided myself throughout my career of, if you call Teddy to come play bass, there's two things that you ain't got to worry about. You don't have to worry about him being on time, and you don't have to worry about him knowing the music and or sounding good. Mm-hmm. And that was my two pillars that I hung my hat on every single time. And to this very day, it has gotten me to very, very higher heights. So playing country and pop music, you know that you're playing parts are vital. You have to stay in your lane, make it easier for the next guy, but at the same time, just don't be a sitting brick. So, and I knew how to do that, just being raised in church and playing gospel music and playing R&B. In certain situations, I knew that I was going to have to stay in my lane and make sure that I'm making it easier for the next guy. So that was the main reason why I picked country and pop, because I knew there was going to be a shorter learning curve. Mm-hmm. And it just really was just going to boil down to who I was going to be able to network with, and thusly so.
Yeah.
So that was the main reason why I chose that genre.
Well, I mean, it's not a bad choice, one, because it's such a rich and lucrative culture too. Like there's a lot of people who are still invested in country music, unlike in other genres. Like in a lot of other genres, I think are more the passive listeners, but I think people still take a lot of pride in who they listen to in that world. Yeah. Also, man, like from getting to know you over the years, there's Southern heritage in your identity too, which is like, like that's a part of the world, honestly, that country music. But country music, I wish was more integrated. You know what I mean? I wish it was more culturally integrated. But it still just makes a lot of sense, because it seems like, just from knowing you, it seems like that represents and expresses a world that you already relate to.
Yeah, country music for me, growing up, was always something that you came across whenever you crossed over the Yadkin River. When you were heading outside for South County and you was heading to Stokes or Yadkin or Davidson or Davie, that was when you were going to get hit with it. And growing up like I did, I grew up on the west side of Winston my entire life. Spent a lot of time in Louisville, went to predominantly white schools. And so I wasn't like completely just shelled off from it. I was very, very, very much aware of it, listening to certain songs that might have came on the radio, but the lifestyle of being Southern, when I started listening to the songs, I could relate to. Tractors, farms, tailgates, beer and whiskey. Well, shit, that's a that's a good Friday or Saturday night whenever the cousins get together and we just kicking it. So I was like, a point of reference was not hard to find.
Yeah.
And so you're very much right. Without me even realizing it, I had a lot more in common with the genre than I thought I did. And probably, now that I think about it, that was probably just indirectly what really pushed me to make that decision, because it was something that I could relate to without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that just made me kind of realize it now.
I remember, I think it was like when you and I went out to Greensboro for rehearsal once, and we got to talking about like guns and different things. I was just like, okay, we like some of the same shit. And I just remember that moment. And of course, like that's kind of the world. It seems like Americana and roots and all these other things, they're like this idealistic version of country living and Southern living. But country music, Nashville country as it stands, it's still that shit. It's still that like, I'm fucking American and I like guns and all that stuff.
Very much so. Very, 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 very much so.
Yeah.
You're correct.
Yeah, man. That's cool though, and also it seems that country has some. Well, it does. It has direct correlation with gospel and R&B.
Oh yeah.
But as you were talking, I remembered how impressive I find gospel in its different variations.
Yeah.
So I would imagine, yeah, like coming from the church gospel world, especially, like the black church, especially, the way that music is treated in those environments, I would
Yeah.
imagine country indeed was a very not steep curve. For
No,
you.
no, by no stretch. I can honestly say with all confidence, if it wasn't for me growing up in church, spiritually and musically, it probably the things that I've done musically probably wouldn't have been as easy as they were if I didn't have that background.
Yeah.
And because music for black people are very much so a direct correlation to who we are as culture wise. You know, you have different looks when it comes to culture and black people, but you can always have some type of musical tie directly to that. And whenever you start talking about church, you're talking about a more in-depth spiritual experience. And just and so music very much ties into that. So I knew if this is what my foundation is, and this is how I was brought up, and this is how I've basically set my career up as a musician, I knew that any genre I went into, I would have had to learn some things, but I still would have been prepared and had the foundations laid to say, like, okay, you got to do this to get to here, yada, yada, yada. And like you said a second ago, just country music spoke to me and my lifestyle more than I thought it did. So musically, going back to that reference of who you are as a musician is a direct correlation to who you are as a person.
Exactly, yeah.
It made it almost, there really wasn't really much of a learning curve.
Yeah.
The only learning curve that I really experienced, honestly, even to this day, is just learning more names and learning the different subgenres of country and what it sounds like and how to play it, which, you know, there's no difference whenever you're sitting down to learn a cover song. You know, they've got the artist that made it, they created it a certain way. And if you want to stay integral to what was made on wax, you know, you got to go through that process of listening and sitting with it and make sure that you not necessarily playing it exactly like them, but you want to stay respectful to the record.
Yeah.
So that, but like I said, I've been doing that since I've picked the instrument up in gospel. So that was really the only learning curve that I honestly experienced, which honestly wasn't anything new.
Help me. I don't know if this is possible or not, you know, because music, you can't put music into plain English that well. No one, you know, like, but there's this magic element to, like, especially black gospel music. Like the church I grew up in, it was all just like a piano and an organ and a choir, and it was just like,
Yeah.
bah, 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 just like that type of thing.
Right.
But you know, I've listened to some black gospel that I really like a lot, and there's a certain. It seems like there's a certain approach. There's a certain soul within that music that's just different, man. That just like plays differently, and I don't know how to describe it.
It's a feeling that you get, like you said, that you honestly just can't put into words. I would equate that to with if you ever met somebody that just the most non-musical person that you can think of and say, hey, you might like this stuff, or take a listen to this, or go to a concert, hear this artist and see how you like it. I'm pretty sure if they did just that and they came back to give their report of, you know, what they thought, they're going to have the exact same thing. Like, I can't really describe what it was, but I felt something.
Yeah.
And that, honestly, because music is what it is, that is the only description that you can give it, is that music is a feeling. You feel something whenever you're listening, whether it be gospel, Americana, country, pop, R&B, whatever, death metal, it doesn't matter. You feel something when your ears hear what's coming out of those speakers that you can't describe. But it either heals or it makes you reflect. Those are probably two words that I can say that will probably describe music in a whole, is healing and reflection.
Healing or reflection. Is there one of those that you're drawn to more, or are they just given the time? Are they both necessary?
So for me personally, they're literally one and the same.
Okay.
Most times there's still two different variations or two different things that I can expound on separately, but for me, they've always happened simultaneously. And it's not even like one comes after the other type deal. It's just something that they both happen that I feel when I'm listening to something. And if I had to put any type of further description on it, I would say reflection always usually makes me go down the thought process of healing, because when you're reflecting, you're thinking about stuff.
Okay.
You're thinking, that starts the process. But there's been plenty of times where I've heard something that I've already had on my mind that was happening or whatever, and I heard a song and it immediately started the process of healing. And that looks completely different, from person to person, but I can honestly say they both were simultaneous for me.
That makes sense. That
Yeah.
makes sense. So they're a together thing.
Yeah.
Rather than
one and the
isolated.
same. Yeah.
And you mentioned it was like listening to music. So is that the same experience as when you're making music?
So it is not. When I'm listening to something, even to this day, if I'm listening to the car or if I'm at the house, whatever, if I'm listening to something, I'm immediately listening to the overall record, the lyrics, the composition, all that stuff, the format, whatever. And then I usually go back and start the song all over again. And I listen to it again. And it's almost like whenever you go to look at a painting, you go to art gallery, look at painting, and you're kind of just staring at it. You see something different every time you look around. You've probably sat and looked at it for 5-10 minutes, but you always end up noticing something in that one sitting. And then you could go away and probably go to a completely different art gallery, see the same picture, and because it's in a different environment, you still notice something completely different. Like, why didn't I see that when I was, over here?
Yeah.
And that's what that process is like for me whenever I'm listening to music. I get a chance to kind of, in my own timing, sit with it, feel what I feel, and then so. It could be a record that I listen to on a consistent basis, but I'm always noticing something different, depending on, how complicated the composition is or the arrangement is. But even with the most simplest song, depending on what you've got going on outside of that, you could feel something different or see something different whenever you're listening to, your favorite song, depending on what you got going on in life at the time.
Yeah.
So that's listening for me. Making, it's still one and the same. You're still kind of aware of what your emotions are at the time, but whenever you're creating something, you're kind of, how do I say this? You're taking what you're already feeling and you're saying, how can I put this out there, or how can I create something to have the audience feel what I'm feeling? So you're still having to be in touch with your emotions. Mm-hmm. That's one key similarity that I can say for both processes. But whenever you're creating, you're kind of already in touch with what your emotional state is at the time. And then you make the decision, okay, do I want the song to feel like this, or do I want it to feel like something completely different? If I want it to feel like something, if I'm, happy and, I done had a great day and all this other stuff, and I'm working on a record about a breakup or something, that's a process in my mind that I got to kind of like flip the switch, because if I'm writing a song about a breakup or I'm help compose a song about a breakup, I can't give off the general notion that I'm happy about it. Not unless that's the end goal that we're like, I've done broke away, I'm happy, or you got your heart broke, you're not feeling happy at that time. Mm-hmm. So you have to tap into a whole nother set of emotions before you even start the process, because that's going to determine how the song's going to come out. So emotional awareness is pivotal for both, but I guess where you feel those emotions differs in the timeline whenever you're going through the process, whether it's going to be at the beginning or the end. That's for me.
And what is that like for you in your mind with your instrument being such a foundational instrument in a larger composition? What is it like getting in sync with the larger piece of music, I guess?
So,
and maybe part of my thinking, part of my curiosity about that is whether it's like an individual sort of thing, or if it's like you're trying to match everybody involved.
So to back up just a smidge, being a bass player in a band is probably one of the most pivotal positions. And I'm not saying that because I am a bass player, but I'm saying that from a full-fledged 16 years of experience of gaining knowledge, talking to other people, and going through my own experiences myself. What you put out there on your instrument can literally make or break or determine what the record is going to be. If you go back to any reference of a song that was either a hit or stood the test of time or any of that jazz, you're going to immediately recognize the rhythm section, guitar, bass, drums. And more specifically with bass and the connection that you have with the drummer sets the tempo of what the record is going to feel like. If it's a party, upbeat, dancing song, usually the drums and bass is a lot more vibrant. They're moving, the patterns are, makes you want to move. If it's a ballad or something that's more centered around lyrical content or whatever, bass and drums are a lot more laid back. They're still there because they still have to push the song, but you can immediately tell the vibe of it. So if you were, sitting in the studio with the console in front of you and you just pull everything down and you're just listening to bass and drums, you can still feel those same emotions that you felt whenever you're listening to the whole composition. And it's not to say that you can't do that whenever you're just listening to the coloring aspects of the record, like piano, guitar, lead, melodies, stuff like that. But that's one thing that a lot of musicians will probably say that indirectly, even if they don't pay attention to it first, they still kind of resolve around the rhythm section. Because, that's the foundation. Yep. You can only build a building but so tall depending on how big your foundation is. And it's the exact same thing with creating a record. So that by itself, I feel like is you have no choice as a rhythm section member, specifically a bass player, to be aware of your surroundings. Now, if you're creating a solo record and you're the one that's going to be doing all the painting, the soloing, and all that other stuff, then you can, quarterback the whole thing, and everybody's got to be centered around you. Mm-hmm. But if you're, playing your part, you have to be aware with what's going on around you. Because if you're playing a ballad, it's probably not going to work if I come in there and thunder thumb that whole thing and I'm thumping and slapping. It's just like, bro, what the hell are you doing? So consciously, if you're going to do your job effectively, you have to pay attention to what everybody else is doing. And that's the same thing mental state wise. And that kind of goes further into the production side. Like if you're help producing the song, I listen to a couple of producers that I follow on a consistent basis, and they touched on that when they're working, if they're like, producing a record with another producer, or they're working with an actual band that has a lot of say with how they want the record to go. They very much said that you've got to be able to figure out the dance between giving them what they want and still being able to be you. So as a bass player playing a key foundational part, I have to figure out okay, they want the record to feel like this. They might not be able to tell me what they want specifically, how they want the bass line to go. That falls on me. But I still have to be able to recognize the end goal and how they want to get to it. I can get to the destination my way, but for the sake of the process, I might have to go a different route that I've never been before just so I can line up with what everybody else is doing, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So it's like you're changing the canvas, so whenever the painter is painting, it has the effect that they want. And a lot of musicians in that case don't realize that they're doing it, but that's very much so what I believe what the process is. You being the chameleon and changing that canvas material whenever you need to get to the end goal that's trying to be accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What's your do you have a favorite sport?
Honestly, I don't. Well, no, I take that back. If I had to say my favorite sport, it would definitely be football. Football is definitely my favorite sport. That's probably the only sport that I really actually like fully pay attention to like the off field stuff. Even though I'm not like a diehard football fan, like some guys I know, they can tell you what plays they're running, the name of the plays, the audible changes, all that shit, and I'm like, all right, cool, but.
Well, so this question might not work exactly as intended because you picked one of the sports that I don't know as well.
Yeah.
But if you were trying to create an analogy for a band with a sports structure, maybe a football offense, what would that, I guess, who would be where?
So bass and drums are interchanging on the offensive line. They're either the center or they're a tackle or guard, but they're on that offensive line because center specifically, if I don't get that ball in the quarterback's hands properly, he can't start his process of completing the play the way he wants to because everything is a pattern. 3-step drop, 4-step, 5-step, whatever, how he holds his hands to receive the ball. He's expecting the ball to hit his hands a specific way. And that's a connection that is worked on day and night, center to quarterback. And same thing with the offensive line. They all have to be in sync to make sure that these front four that's coming after the quarterback is protected. And if there's a blitz coming or there's somebody that's coming off the edge or on the inside, they've got to pick that up outside of whatever man that they've got to guard for the play that they're running. So bass and drums are definitely on that offensive line because depending on how we play or how we perform, it's going to be a direct, like, inevitable result of how the quarterback or whoever's at lead can perform. If we're not protecting him or holding him up or staying in sync, it makes it very difficult for that front man to perform in front of all these people.
Right.
And they can either be cheering us on or they can be that 350-pound defensive tackle that's coming to rip his head off. It can be either way. But no matter what the circumstance, our job is to make sure that whoever's up front is comfortable. If I explained that right.
Yep, I totally agree. Totally agree. And then I was picturing like a guitar soloist is like a running back that thinks he's like going to make it all the way, but then he does.
He hits a wall and all that stuff. Yeah, very much so.
Definitely.
Very, very much so.
Definitely guitarists are running the ball.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree.
When I was working construction for a while, I had this day where, because a lot of the time when I was working construction during like quarantine days, it was only like a 3-person crew. This was totally different kind of construction. It was like log cabin boutique construction. So it was a whole different thing.
Yeah.
But one day, once we finally had like a 4th and 5th person with us and we had like a whole motion going, I realized that it was exactly the same as a basketball offense. It was just like, it worked exactly the same way. Like
Right.
you had a coach and you had like a point guard who was kind of making everything go like this.
Yeah.
And as long as your forwards were kind of like in the right position, everything was happening, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit, I think sports might be we might respond. So part of the reason we might respond so positively to sports is like the organizational aspect of it might be the same that we use for everything or
Oh,
something.
for sure. Any team oriented thing, whether it's sports, corporate, whatever, if it involves multiple people, you can definitely make the points of reference. And whenever you're playing in the band, it's because it's you're having to think outside yourself.
Yeah.
Or you're having to consider scenarios and situations that have nothing to do with you. So yeah,
It's basically collaboration. Yeah.
especially collaboration.
Did you play sports coming up?
I didn't. I wrestled for 1 year, my junior year in high school. I was terrible, but I wrestled my junior year in high school, and I think I played t-ball when I was in elementary school for like a year, but that was it.
I did grow up playing. I grew up playing my fair share of sports, and I do feel like it is part of the whole contraption in my
Yeah.
mind for why I love bands so much, why I love being in bands so much. 'Cause
Yeah.
there's just something so. It's, sports is another one of those realms that it's so constantly creative and alive
Yes.
compared to like normal working environments that it's just like it's just a whole different depth of satisfaction that
Yes.
you can get from the creative arts, from the performance arts, from sports. Sports, I think, is a performance art, really.
Yeah, it is. I'm with you on that. Not going too in depth in that whole aspect, but it very much so has many branches that you can jump out on to accomplish the goal. Scoring, there's schematics, there's all that, and all that stuff is determined by multiple people. You know, you've got your head guy that's calling the play, but the players have to execute, and not execute by itself, but they have to do it in a high caliber fashion, depending on who they're playing against. So they can't be, lazy that day. If they're playing, one of the top 5 ranked defenses in the league, they can't go out there pussyfooting around. They gotta be on top. They gotta be on it.
Yeah.
Or something is gonna fold. And it doesn't take multiple failures for anything to go wrong. It could just be one thing at many positions that can dead that entire play. So yeah, I agree with you. Sports directly is a very equal line when it comes to playing in the bands and stuff like that.
Well, I hadn't actually thought about this before, but trying to think about the competition component of it, and because I'll be real, I'll be candid about this. Like, so, and as you know, one thing we talked about when we were on the phone, we've been talking about like getting in shape and like doing things,
Yeah.
getting the whatever. I've been doing sports shit lately. I've been playing basketball. I've played a couple full court like 5-on-5 games.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of a person I used to be that I like forgot about.
Yeah.
And something I'd forgot about was like being competitive. And so it was interesting. I go out there and kind of see these guys, and some of these guys will like hit a 3 in your face and just be like, "Fucking, did you see that?"
Yeah.
And I'll be like, "Yeah, I saw it." You like that?
Yeah,
Let me
like-
shoot again, see what happens. And you're like, "Damn!" Like, and I was thinking about like how like what it means to be competitive in music, and I think it's something like in stand-up comedy. You see the competitiveness because the crowd will like eat you alive
Yeah.
if you suck.
Yeah.
And I think in music, it's something like they won't be immersed in what you're doing if you suck.
Yeah.
I think it's that.
Yeah.
So you're competing with the crowd's likelihood of not being immersed in the musical experience.
Very much so. Very, very much so. One thing that I have learned when I started playing country music, the audience that I'm playing to could be either very pivotal on how the gig goes, or they could be a non-factor. And what I mean by that is, if they're very pivotal, they're very in tune with what you're playing. If you're playing the song that they love, and this is a song that they listen to thousands of times each week, either on their way to work or if they're chilling or whatever, that's just their song, and you're playing it and you don't hit like a key part that they love, or you don't play something right, they're kind of going to be like, oh. And they're going to show that displeasure in whatever way. They can either be silent about it, or they're going to be like, yeah, I'm going to go to the bar and get something to drink and just leave. Mm-hmm. So, but when you're up on that stage, you see all of that.
Yeah.
You see all the good, the bad, the ugly, all that. So they can be that pivotal, or they can just be, hey man, I'm just here for a good time. I love live music. They don't care if you missed a change, or if you cut a part out of a song or whatever. They just know what they hear, they love, and they're just having a great time.
Yeah.
There's been plenty of times that we were playing and everybody just like royally messed up. I'm talking about I played a wrong note, or guitar player missed a change, or the singer forgot lyrics, or voice cracked. So there's something noticeable that even the most common ear can hear and be like, yeah, that wasn't right.
Yeah.
And I have seen two completely different responses to that. And that's when I knew that this lane that I'm in now there's different variations with the crowd. And I never really seen or got that before. I've seen it or experienced it, but not as consistent as I do now.
That's interesting. Mm-hmm. I think I used to see what you're talking about. And I think my preference is like, I think my ideal crowd member is like the person who is looking right at me and is like attentive is the word I would use.
Yeah.
Like they're almost judging it in real time. When I used to play the garage, I used to kind of like, I would know, or when I used to play bowls, like I would notice when somebody was like the de facto, just, I love everything.
Yeah.
And that they were like kind of emoting that to the band. Like, I just love it all. And I also often noticed that person was like dancing out of time with the music.
Yeah,
they.
Yeah.
And I was like, it felt false to me.
Really?
Sometimes it felt like that, like they were not my ideal candidate for like the deep connection that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Because for me, I'm looking for like the almost like a verbal connection, because I'm more focused on lyrics than anything else, lyrics and vocals. Mm-hmm. So I'm like looking for this, like I'm singing at you and you're receiving it in your ears more so than like the person
that's just kind of just out of it.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of shows the different standpoints that you have talking about the whole being on stage. You know, you're up front, you're singing, you have the bigger space and opportunity to have that connection with the crowd because you're the one that's basically on the front line.
Yeah.
So your standpoint of what you're looking for is going to be completely different from the guy that's in the back, you know, just holding the low end down like me.
Yep.
But I can say that has easily changed over the past few months because, you know, first starting off with Jukebox, you know, I was just the bass player. You know, they knew who I was. You know, they knew my name, knew I played bass, but, you know, you had three other guys that was up front that was getting the blunt of the attention, you know, before and after the show.
Yeah.
Now it's different. I've got people coming directly up to me like, we love you, blah, blah, blah. Like I'm the artist now. And that was a whole different type of process. So I can completely see where you're at whenever you're talking about the crowd, because I'm starting to have that change myself. Because before, I would just be like, I would recognize those different crowd members, the ones that was just like, I'm just happy to be here. I love live music. And then having the ones that are just being attentive and just being there and sitting still and barely showing any emotions and kind of barely clapping whenever you get done. So you don't know if they hated it or loved it.
Yeah. Man, God, Yeah, I've seen so many things that are coming to mind. People, they have their own ways of trying to express what they're connected with too, and
Yeah.
it's like I don't want that to come wrong. Like I take all of it as a positive thing, but like some of it just puzzles me so much, you know.
It was like that for me for a while, even now to this day, because the crowd member that's attentive and that's just sitting there and just judging what they're hearing. For the longest time, I was like, they are not digging what we're playing. They're either bored or they're just here and yada, yada, yada. And then you've got times where the entire crowd is like that. So you've got 1,000 people sitting in their lawn chairs, staring at you, not dancing, not tapping a foot.
Yeah.
And you're up there sweating, going after it, giving all the goods.
Yeah. I told
And
this,
you get the golf clap afterward, and you're like, "Oh, all right, cool."
yeah, you are right.
And you go through 2 hours, the whole gig, and you're packing up, and you're defeated. Like, yep, this was terrible. But then you've got all these people coming up to you like, "Y'all are probably the best band I've ever heard live."
Damn.
And you're like, "What? What do you mean? You enjoyed that?" Like, you literally sat there almost grimacing the entire time. Like, you were moving more whenever we were on break.
Yeah.
And you mean to tell me that and sure enough, we've actually got booked for a lot of private functions from those type of crowd members.
That's so funny.
Just sitting there and almost just frowning at what you're doing. And then they book you to play in their living room for a private function for almost double than what you made at the festival or the gig that you played at. And it's just like, it's a cluster in the mind for sure. You're just like, I don't know how this all makes sense, but all right.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. Yeah. You just never know. You never know what's going on in the person's head.
You don't.
I told this story to John Ray, who is a well-known bassist in the area.
Phenomenal bass player.
And I'll tell you, too, because I think bassists, I think they're the most saddened by this. Maybe drummers, but
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll share it. That I was watching a band play on 4th Street back in the day. This was like back when they used to shut down the block between Aperture and Camino and have music on 4th Street. And they had booked this, like, I think it was like an African band or like maybe like a Brazilian band, or I'm not sure, but something very rhythmic.
Yeah.
They had booked this band, very rhythmic music starts, like very high energy, lots of like Afro rhythm. And everybody was just kind of like sitting like this, like watching, you know, and like then I remember they had part of their show was like this dancer he would literally run off the front of the stage and do a flip onto the pavement, land on his feet, and then start dancing.
Yeah.
And in that moment, like everyone was supposed to go crazy and dance with him, and it's supposed to be great. Instead, everyone was just like,
Yeah, it just
watched.
You're like, bruh.
And at the end of after the song, the guitarist was like, sorry guys, we're a little caught off guard. We're used to crowds that like dance.
Yeah, going crazy and going nuts, right? Yeah.
People just watched. It was,
Bruh, it's like, I really feel like as artists, as musicians, anybody that's in the arts, whenever you're performing, everybody has like preset in their mind what they want the crowd to respond like, depending on the type of performance. Like if you're singing a sad song, you're not expecting everybody to be hanging from the rafters and you know, yelling at the top of their lungs. But it's those times where you realize when they respond completely opposite of what you're expecting, that just it messes with you. And that stuff, honestly, depending on when it happens, it could determine your energy for the rest of the show, because I very easily pulled a stool or a chair up on that stage and sat for the rest of that gig if I was in front of those sitters, as I call them.
Yeah.
And then come to find out, they appreciated us more in value than they did when we go play a bar and everybody's just yelling and screaming and all that stuff.
I do think it's a real thing, man. Again, it depends. Like there are other people. Like back when I was back in the day, like 2012. I had a house band at Bulls, and we were that kind of band. Like our expression was for the bar. It was for the bar scene. It was higher energy. It wasn't what you know that I do.
Right.
And so, of course we were trying to cater to the way that people express their appreciation for music in those environments. But like, that's not my nature,
Yeah.
And my nature is like, my nature in those times was sort of like, yeah, I get that that's what I'm supposed to do, and that's what like other bands in this situation do.
Yeah.
But that's obviously not my fate as an artist. My fate as an artist is more like the larger stage with the people who are like, I want to hear this song.
Yeah.
Like that's for me, that's my dream, is like playing a large room where people know my shit,
Know your stuff,
and want to
Which,
hear.
I mean,
song.
that's kind of like the basis of most artists.
Yeah.
They want to play in a certain size room with everybody that's there that came to see them and hear them and hear their stuff. So that, you're speaking to the norm with most artists. I can say with full confidence.
So tell me what is on the horizon for Jukebox? Like, what are y'all doing?
So,
and if you want to talk, like, okay, so let me ask that again with this question inserted in there. I want to know what y'all have on the horizon, but also I'll share with you the question I shared with you leading into this, like privately, which was, I know that some people are curious about the like transitions that have gone on with Jukebox Rehab over time. If you'd like to take the opportunity to talk about just the different changes that the band has seen, you're welcome to.
Last year, I want to say about, to my knowledge, maybe January, February, Dustin, the lead guitar player and one of the three vocalists, he was having conversation with the main core, the four that is JBR at the time, and he ultimately voiced his opinions about stuff, how he was feeling, things were going on in his personal life that drew him to the decision of leaving. So he left, I want to say in March of 22. Well, after that, simultaneously, John Montgomery, the front man, he, from what was shared with us, had some things going on personally in his life. Some things he's told me directly, some things he told, Morgan and Mike and Dustin, some stuff that he had going on. And I want to say maybe a month later, April, it caused him to step away from the band. Mm-hmm. Now, in most cases, bands break up all the time. That's not an uncommon thing. Or that is a common thing. What's uncommon is usually whenever you have that many founding members, and I say founding somewhat loosely, founding members of a band to leave, that's usually grounds of dismantling everything.
Yeah.
But Mike and Morgan had a conversation and they wanted to keep going. Now, up until that time, Jukebox Rehab was very much a vocal band. John was mostly leading and Morgan and Dustin was singing background. Of course, they led songs individually, but not as much as John. But they were, a 3-part vocal type band, which is, when you hear country music, that's what you hear. You hear parts, you hear vocals. And all of the originals were mostly written by John. And, Morgan and Dustin helped write a few, but majority of the writing of the originals were by John. So when John decided to leave and Mike and Morgan had their conversation, they decided, John wrote these songs. He brought them to the band. He's making the decision to leave. He's going to take his songs with him. So then that was when we sat down, Mike, Morgan, me, and Marcus, the keyboard player, us four sat down and we had a conversation on what direction we want the band to go. So up until that time, we were known for straight ahead country music. We played a lot of 80s stuff, 90s, early 2000s, the golden era of country music. That's mostly the covers that we played. The originals that we had were current. They felt current, but they had a lot of old school country vibe to them because that's what John loves to listen to. So a lot of songs that he wrote put you in that mom train, but they were still incredible songs. So when we made the decision of what way we wanted to go, we made the decision of, we're going to play country music still, but we're going to play more radio stuff, more newer stuff that the younger audience would listen to on the radio or they would buy and things of that nature. And what ended up happening was we went down the line of, okay, well, we're playing this new school country stuff. Well, let's play some other songs that we like. And Morgan, he's kind of the melting pot out of all of us. We all listen to a different array of stuff, but we still have like our specific genres that we like to listen to. Morgan literally likes to listen to a lot of stuff. And with him basically being out front by himself now, we were like, okay, well, Morgan, what's some stuff that you want to do that we didn't do before? Mike, what's some stuff that you want to do that we didn't do before? They asked me. Marcus said, you got some songs? And we ended up kind of going down this pathway that embodied our name a lot more. Jukebox Rehab, when the story was told to me, it came from a friend of the band that when they heard them play, it reminded them all the songs that you would play whenever you went to Waffle House or someplace and you put some money in the jukebox and you listen to all the old country songs that you don't get to listen to on the radio. And we played them at live shows and people loved them for it because we were being nostalgic, but we still had our own modern spin to it because, we're all younger guys. Everybody's below the age of 40.
Yeah.
So, nobody's really that old. But when the switchover happened, we were like, okay, there's still a ton of stuff out there that we love and listen to and that the audience that's coming to our shows, they listen to as well. So why don't we play some of those songs? So we honestly we're in the country lane, but I can honestly say we are not a country band anymore. We are not a country band. We play country music, but that's not the only thing that you hear whenever you come to a JBR show now. So that was probably the biggest change that happened whenever Dustin and John left. We decided to embody our name more. Whenever you go to a jukebox, you don't see just one genre of music. There's literally everything.
A little bit of everything.
It's a little bit of everything in there.
Yep.
So, okay, if we're going to still stay Jukebox Rehab, well, let's be Jukebox Rehab. Let's play a little bit of everything. And that's what we decided to do last year. And I can honestly say it has yielded us way more success, way quicker than we all expected. I was a little concerned that the fans that we lost and the venues that we didn't play anymore was going to be kind of the new realm of what we had to deal with for a while. Because at the time we were doing out of town stuff, but it was nowhere near as much stuff that we were doing, locally inside of North Carolina. But
she's being such a jerk.
But I can say with confidence that formula that we came up with that we wanted to do, it was exactly in line with what they wanted to hear, old fans and new. So anytime we went somewhere new, we were playing songs outside of the country stuff. They were like, they were responding to it. Going back to how we was talking about how the crowd was responding, we were getting that big pop. They were like, "Oh, I love this song," or "I love this," blah blah blah. And we all know if the crowd's happy and they're drinking and buying shots and all that, then the bar is happy.
Yeah.
And if the bar is happy, the promoter is going to be like, "Okay, let's fill up this, the calendar," which in turn works for us because we're getting booked.
Yep.
So honestly, when the split happened, we didn't feel the weight of it like most bands would. Not by a long shot. We pivoted quickly, and I've told the guys this numerous times, but I can say it publicly. I'm very proud of how we responded to that. And that's not to say that we wasn't getting backlash. We've heard all types of rumors locally of what happened and all that stuff. And quite honestly, it really doesn't matter, the negative side of that whole split, because all in all, we walked away from it not smelling like smoke. We were able to sit down, come up with a plan, and the plan worked better than what we were expecting, like even on the upward side. So we're playing a different show. Hell, I'm even singing in the background now.
Hell yeah.
I have never had a mic in front of me on stage when I'm playing in any situation, but I'm singing background now. Marcus is singing background as well. So it's a totally new experience for me because, like I said, I'm just used to being the bass player in the band and just, a couple of people here and there, "Hey man, you sound great," blah, blah, blah. But now, like, I'm an artist. Like, I am Jukebox Rehab now.
Yeah.
I'm not just the bass player for them. Like, when you say Jukebox Rehab, you think of Morgan, Mike, Teddy, and Marcus.
Hell yeah.
Which is completely new for me in a sense, which is a whole nother learning curve. But yeah, man, it's musically it's took us on a different route. Individually, we're in a new space that we didn't think we would be in, but it's yielded us to the point where we've been doing so well playing the show that we're in the studio now creating new songs, which was the goal for us. When we first sat down after the split happened, but the timing of it, we didn't know when that was going to be, because we were thinking like, okay, we got to pick the right cover songs, create the right show so we can set the narrative of what we want this to be and, start booking and playing out and all this other stuff. But like I said, everything was happening so fast and the response that we were getting was so positive and everything was coming in so quickly. Even we're playing more out of town shows now than we ever have. So it's like, okay, it went from, okay, well, one day we're gonna work on originals, but we're gonna record one day. It's like, okay, we have to record now.
Yeah.
Which is a good problem to have for a band, to like have the necessity to put out original music, because the fan base has grown so much that it's like, okay, we have to put out originals now. Because going back to the old band, we had what, six or seven original songs, original songs that was embedded into the set list every night that we played. So, the fans that would come to hear us play, they knew that they were going to hear certain original songs. And there were some original songs that we didn't have in the set list that they would call out, like, "Hey, Jeans like that," or this, or "Hey Mom," or just, whatever, song that we didn't have in the set list that was just on the EP.
Yeah.
That they wanted to hear. So we were like, we know that we want to get back to that spot to where the fans are coming to hear our stuff. So, like I said, the whole timeline was, it happened. It's all happening quicker than we thought, which is a good problem to have. So we're in the studio right now. We're working with a guy named Zach Bean. He's doing the heavy lifting, producing wise on the records. We've got everything demoed out, vocally, and Morgan and Mike went down to Georgia to work with a guy named Levi on the writing and stuff like that. So we've got all the foundational pieces put in place, but we're currently working on recording six originals that will probably be out by the end of March, beginning of April.
Hell yeah, that's perfect timing.
Yeah.
That's perfect timing.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I'm glad it's going well. I'm glad to hear that the band is doing well.
I'm not going to sit here and say that I wasn't concerned.
Yeah.
Whenever Dustin and John left, because like I said, it's very rare that you have pivotal pieces of a band leave, especially a band like that.
Yeah.
And it stay together. I physically haven't seen that with my own eyes, let alone be a part of something like that.
Yeah.
So, when they left, I immediately went back to 2020, leaving my job to play music full time. And that happened. I'm like, oh, great. Mm-hmm. Okay. But Mike called me and he said, hey, look, whatever you decide to do, I don't blame you. No one really seen this coming. Well, they did, but they didn't. We know the sacrifice that you made. If you don't want to be a part of it no more, I can't blame you. And Mike and Morgan said that to me individually, just separate conversations. But, I just want to let you know that we still want you here. And I've got faith that we're going to be able to bounce back from this. And again, talking to Brittany, and of course she's in the know of what's happening and all this stuff and what's going on, especially now, after Dustin left. She was kind of on alert. Then when I had to turn around and tell her a month later that John left, she's full fledged. Like, you kidding me? So she's asking questions. What are y'all going to do? What are y'all going to do? I'm like, bro, as soon as I find out, I will let you know. And, I told her that, Mike and Morgan want to keep going. And she asked like, well, how do you think that's going to turn out? Because we're going from a 3-piece vocal front line to basically just one guy. Even though John was doing most of the lifting when it came to singing the songs, he still had Dustin and Morgan up there singing parts, and the load can be spread at any given moment. But now you've got one guy that is vocally carrying the show and entertaining at the same time. So I told her, if anybody could handle the load of doing it all by themselves, it's going to be Morgan. Morgan has always been the entertainer in the group. Always. And when it came down to him, I could see it in his eye when I seen him the very next time. He didn't budge. Now, we've had conversations and he, told me how he really felt about everything. But as far as carrying Jukebox Rehab and continue to go on, he said, let's go. And that mostly centered around him having trust in Mike, me, and Marcus to be there and to hold him up and to make sure that he doesn't fall.
Yeah.
Because we're all going through this transition of, okay, you're no longer on just the supporting rhythm section piece. You're now on the front. So you're doing the photo shoots, you're doing the interviews, you're talking to the fans now. And he had confidence in us and especially me and Marcus, to know that we're going to be able to handle that in stride and we're all just going to be in it together. So after explaining that to her, and she was like, well, I see where you're coming from and I see how it's going. And she's like, well, how is that handling with booking? Because up until that point, we were only booking heavy like 6 months at a time. So we were still in the first half of the year. Most of the time, around May, June, that's when we would start backloading, July on through December. And I told her like, well, people are still holding true to the dates that we got. They're aware, because Mike Stevens, the guy that handles a lot of our booking, you know, he had to make the phone call like, hey, we had a guy leave with this, that, and the third, blah, 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 and have that conversation. But it was like some of them were like, okay, well, you know, we'll see how it goes, but let's keep the date and just go from there. And I want to say that put the pressure on us to like, okay, we have to make sure that this show delivers. But I can honestly say whenever we were going through the process of changing everything over, no one came off like urgent, like antsy. We were just like, let's do it to it. And I think because all of us were in uniform with that feeling mentally, that made the physical work that we had to do way easier than we thought.
Yeah.
So whenever we started playing those first few shows underneath that new regimen, it was some bumps, it was some bruises, but it wasn't as bad as we thought we were. Like, we were very surprised how the crowd responded. And even going into new places that's never heard us before, but they heard the old Jukebox Rehab and the show that we put on then, and now they're getting something completely different. They were like blown away. It's like, you guys sound amazing.
Yeah.
And that's without a lead guitar player and, you know, 2 vocals singing background. Because me and Marcus wasn't singing background until maybe a few months ago. So just explaining that to Brittany of where I felt like it was going to go. And again, she just like, all right, I trust you, basically. It was like, for me, it was like, okay, this was like the first big hurdle that I've come across in making the decision of being a full-time musician. So now I have to like really make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do and then some, as far as even outside of Jukebox Rehab, making sure that I'm doing everything that I need to do as a musician to make sure that I'm keeping my ducks in a row.
Yeah.
Because it can very easily end with that being your main source. So it made me work a little harder on my craft, to be candid. It made me become better. It made me become more attentive to my playing skills. And it yielded me some more opportunity outside of playing the Jukebox Rehab to make me more financially secure. So now, after going through a split in a band, a major split in a band, I'm now at the point where money-wise, I'm making more than I ever had working than I've just by doing music than I have working the 9 to 5 and doing music on the side. Mm-hmm. And that's just with playing with Jukebox Rehab and playing at church on Sunday. So it proved to me, going through a big obstacle like that, almost like the equivalent of possibly getting rolled up on your job and possibly losing your job, that if you stay the course, you're gonna go through some stuff. But if you bet on yourself in the beginning, sometimes you got to keep on going. And I decided to do that, and I'm in the best place monetarily that I've been ever as a musician. And I can honestly say that it started with Jukebox Rehab, and it's because of Jukebox Rehab now, even after the split, that I'm able to do that.
Yeah.
So,
well, I feel like you punctuated that story really well. We've been rolling for about an hour and a half. I think as much as I feel like I could. That hour and a half flew by. I feel like we could talk for 3 hours, and we probably should at some point.
Yeah.
With the chaos of the dog and everything, I'll go ahead and wrap us up for today. But thank you for telling me the story of just like that whole thing of how it kind of like that whole. I think that whole experience of kind of successfully transitioning to a full-time place is probably going to be inspiring for people to kind of hear about, and also really good for people to hear, like for especially fans of y'all's to kind of hear a little bit about what happened with Jukebox Rehab.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just been very fun to like hear that you sound happy and you sound
Yep.
like you were like fucking very clear about what you're doing. And I'm happy to hear that you're able to be full time doing what we
that,
all
man.
want to be doing.
I appreciate it. I really do. And like I told you on the phone, if I can be just a small beacon of light for somebody to be like, they hear this and they're like, you know what? If the opportunity comes, I'm going to do it. And it's not going to be easy. Financially, you have to make sure that you have things in place to make sure that you can take care of yourself, especially if you've got responsibilities like children and or a wife. But I can honestly say that my decision was it hinged very much so on my family.
Yeah.
That was my number one thing. And whenever I mentioned it to Brittany, that was what I did my best to come across to her and tell her that I'm not going to say yes to this if you really don't think that it's going to yield a good result and it's going to put us in trouble.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to wait until we're actually in the hole to try to figure out how I'm going to get out of it. Like, no, if you think that the hole is going to come, then I'm not going to put us in that state. Because we could have took the bump financially if something were to happen and be able to bounce back. Because I know I would, be able to go back, either back to Spectrum or go get another job. Like I put contingency plans in place to make sure that we'll be okay. But I didn't want my decision, like some musicians have made the decision. I didn't want my personal decision of going after my personal dream put everybody else in stake. Because you never know what the end result can be. And that was my biggest concern. Has it been easy? God, no. But like I said, having that conversation with my wife, and even though it wasn't 100% yes, she still allowed the grace to be there for me to make the decision to do it.
Yeah.
Because she had a little bit of faith in me. And I can honestly say throughout this whole process of me, making the decision and things that I had to do and think about, it still yielded to Brittany giving the response that she gave.
Yeah.
And yeah, I will never forget that. Ever. Never.
Good lessons, I think, for people to take from your experience. So
I'm glad.
Yeah, man. Well, fuck. I'm really glad we got to catch up and talk, and I'm glad you got to share all of that. And I look forward to next time. So,
oh yeah, definitely. I feel like a part 2 would be fitting, where we can just go after it.
Yeah, especially on a longer day when I don't have 2 in one day. That would be that'd be awesome. So let's set that up.
Okay.
In the meantime, Marble, quit. In the meantime, thank you again for coming over.
No, thank you, man. Thank you for the call. I appreciate it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.